Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
No, ma'am, we just started week 8.
Right. So if week 9 content is released, then obviously it has to be done. From what I remember, I think these contents usually fall within the week 8 modules, stress and aspiration and all that, right? So we'll do one thing before we go to the other. Actually, a lot of topics from the week 1 to 7 is already covered. The ones that you'll have later on are going to be mostly, I think, in writing and reading and all that. So what we'll do is, since you already have this one, this particular topic, right? Both not, yeah, both stress and aspiration. Since you have that for the quiz, and I probably think we might take 2 weeks to do that, right? So this week and next week, obviously, we are going to work on that. So we'll do one thing. We'll work on the module on stress now, right? And maybe towards the end, we can take up all those miscellaneous ones like collocations and all that, right? Okay. So let's start off for today then. I'll share a PPT with you initially to discuss the aspects on stress, right? And then we can go ahead and do the activity. So maybe for half of the session today, we can discuss about the stress patterns, and then if time permits, we'll take up the activity. We'll have some time. We'll work a little bit of that today, and then can continue and finish it off in the next class. Okay. Right. Just give me a moment. I'll share the PPT with you, and then we can start off. Stress patterns. Right, you can see the screen clearly, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, right. So it's title session 10, but we are taking it up earlier since you have it for the quiz, right? Okay, so before we begin with anything, there are a couple of other topics that requires discussion on, right? So you're going to tell me what you already know about it, right? Because one part when you learn about stress patterns in English is that you also understand the concept of syllabification, right? So you should know what are syllables or how syllables work in languages. We begin with syllables. So let's say, let's talk about syllables, right? What do you understand about syllables? Yes,
Part of a word.
it's part of a word.
Part of a
So,
sound.
uh, part of a sound? No. Syllable is not a part of a sound. Sounds come together, they combine to form syllables for sure. But, we don't deal with understanding of syllable in that way, right? So sound is a unit. Yes, we know, we have already looked at that in the first couple of modules, right? And we know there's a combination involved in the sounds in order to make a word, right? And there are certain patterns or certain phonological phonetic patterns that's required. There are rules about what sounds can combine together to form a word. Not every other combination is not allowed. All of that is your knowledge about language at the sound level, right? A syllable is basically a morphological unit, which means that it is usually discussed as the part of a word and not sounds, right? So it's the next level of coding as far as language is concerned. So syllable is a basic unit of the word, which means you cannot have a word without, having a syllable, right? So syllables, various syllables combined together in an allowed pattern in based on the morphological rules in the language that is concerned to form a word, right? So this is basically that. What is the structure of a syllable? We are not going to like discuss in detail about the structure of syllable. That's beyond the scope of your studies. But one should know what basically does a syllable constitute of, right? What is the constitution of a syllable? What is a cluster formed of? Tell me that first. If I'm talking about a consonant cluster, then what is it? Cluster or consonant cluster usually, right? So cluster has what? What is cluster?
Multiple sounds in them.
I
Multiple
think
sounds?
the combination of two or more
Right.
consonants.
Correct. So it's the combination of two or more consonant sounds. Correct. That's absolutely right. Other people, you can also participate. You just don't have to be silently listening to it. We are also revising concepts. Uh, that way, you don't have to cram up for a session at the end of the semester. Right. Okay. So that is a cluster. Now, if I talk about a syllable, then what is that? Syllables can be combination of consonants and vowel, right? And the most important part of a syllable is going to be a vowel, right? A syllable becomes a syllabic unit, or you call something a syllable because of the presence of a vowel sound, right? So keep this in mind that you can never have a syllable without the help of a vowel sound, which is where the argument comes that you cannot form a word without a vowel sound, right? If you don't have a vowel sound, it's difficult to form a word, or it is almost impossible to form a word. This has come from the fact that the basic constitution of a word includes syllables, which in turn can only be formed with the help of a vowel sound. So there are the number of consonants in a given syllable is not something that is important. Even if you have just one vowel sound in that syllabic unit, you can have a syllable. So that becomes a more important sound as opposed to vowels are more important sounds or more significant to the formation of a syllable as opposed to a consonant sound, right? Consonants can be there or need not be there, right? Even without a consonant, you can have a vowel, a syllable form, but not without a vowel, right? So basic structure, then you should know that a syllable will definitely have a vowel. It can have consonants, but what it cannot not have is a vowel sound, right? You definitely need a vowel sound. Okay. So based on the number of vowel sounds in a given word, you can have several kinds of, a classification of words. Like you can say monosyllabic words, you can say disyllabic words, you can say trisyllabic words. So if I say monosyllabic words, what is my implication? What are monosyllabic words?
Single.
Only one vowel is there.
Just one.
One syllable.
Yes,
Vowel
yes.
sound.
One syllable.
One syllable, which means there's only going to be one vowel sound, right? When I say one syllable, my implication is also that there's only one vowel sound that's present in the whole word, right? Right. Now, if you have two vowel sounds, or if I say disyllabic, what does that mean? Disyllabic words?
There will be two syllables.
Two syllables, right? The word is formed with the help of two syllables. Similarly, you have trisyllabic, right? You also have what we call as polysyllabic. So don't ask me why do they have common name for anything else beyond that. So the first three set is categorized as mono, di, and tri. And then anything above that, anything with four syllable and above is known as a polysyllabic word, right? Um, right. So this understanding of syllable and syllable unit is very important as far as stress patterns in English are concerned. English is a stress-timed language. So to understand the stress pattern or even the stress marking, it is very important that you understand the concept of syllable, right? Which is why a brief discussion on that. There are more more discussions on These, if you're interested, you may find it out on your own, but we are not going to do that as a part of the course. Okay? It's not within the scope. Right. How many? Aryan, you tell me. Now you know what a syllable is and how do you work on that. So you should be able to work on it. What is it? How many syllables in machinery?
Ma'am, maybe there are 4.
So you are asking, I know, but you try to work it out on your own. Now that you know how many. Yeah. Which ones? 4. But what are the sounds? Oh, sorry, what are the syllables? How would you figure out what syllables you have? Basically, you just need to look at the vowel sounds, right? So you have machinery, right? The sound, then sound, and then comes another sound, and then sound, right? That's machinery. Okay. Yes, that's right. So all you need to know is machinery. No, Arun. Machinery has 4, like it's mentioned here, right? So do the syllabification properly. The first one has, after ma, you have a vowel sound, then after sh again, and then again you have one after na, and then again after the r sound, right? So 4 total. Okay. What was I talking about? Yes. So based on,
Ma'am, excuse me, ma'am.
yeah.
Yeah, ma'am. Then in this word general, I'm
Hmm.
confused. Are there 2 syllables or 3?
In general has 3. It's not general. It is definitely said as general, but then there is an inbuilt vowel after na. So it's 3. It's not general. It's general.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. Correct, Push. You're right. Okay. So now that you understand the importance of things, so why do we need it? If it is stress time, why are we talking about all these things, syllables and all? Because the stresses are usually received or they are taken on one of the syllables in the given word, right? And what do we know about stress? What do we mean by stress? When I say that a certain syllable in the word is stressed, what am I meaning to say? What is the implication of that?
Emphasized more.
Come again. Sorry, did not hear you.
It is emphasized more.
It is emphasized, right? And correct, you are right. We mean that it is emphasized. And when I say it is emphasized, what do we mean? We
Like
mean
when
that
we pronounce it, we stress more on that word, the letter.
you're going round and round. Okay, stress is emphasis is stress. Okay, no problem. So what we mean by stress or emphasis, when I say I'm stressing on something, particularly in, with regards to words, right? When I say a particular syllable in a word, stress, all I mean to say is that that particular syllable in the word is pronounced a bit longer and louder than the rest, right? So it is as opposed to, now this is all relative. Okay, don't tell me, but how do you measure these things? We don't have to. Okay, when I say louder and longer than the other syllables, this is a relative thing, right? It doesn't mean that when I say something like, say, for example, pronunciation, right, which is, it has the suffix shin. So the syllable, the penultimate syllable or the syllable right before the suffix needs to be stressed, right? That's the rule. So it doesn't mean that when I say pronunciation, I would say pronunciation, right? That's not the meaning is. It probably is too limited or too, the duration could be too small for someone to even realize quickly. But yet, in comparison, when compared to the other syllables or the other units in the word, this particular syllable is relatively pronounced a little longer and louder than the other. That is what stress means, right? In spontaneous speech, in your day-to-day life, when you're talking to people, it is not very easy to note the difference, yet it is available, right? So it's not so prominent that you can say, oh, this is actually louder and longer. But when you compare it to the other syllables, other units in the given word, you know that, yes, certainly this part is being pronounced with a little more of an emphasis. This is pronounced a little louder. and long. That's what the idea of stress is, right? Okay. Right. So that's on stress. So if you've understood that part, then we can start looking at the rules. I see some questions in the chat. What is this? Stress or not?
Ma'am, I have a question about stress.
Yeah.
Ma'am, do stress rely on individual pronunciations of particular words?
No. Individual pronunciation of particular words is what? Please explain. I don't understand the question.
Ma'am, I mean, if there is a particular word
Ah.
and two or three people pronounce them differently,
Hmm.
so do stress patterns are fixed or they vary?
No, stress patterns don't vary. It can vary from language to language, but not in a given language. So in English, stress patterns would be fixed for any word. Okay, so they don't change based on the speaker, right? There could be variations, but they are not accounted for rules, right? Variations are usually not accounted for rules. And the variation could be due to several other factors, right? So, for example, say the same variety of one of the varieties of English, okay, could have a different stress associated with it. So the standard English may use one set of stress. Someone who speaks English around the Scotland or someone who speaks it around Wales may have a different stress pattern in some of the words that they use. But these are only variations that you find in a set of them. This is not the case for every other word that you would see in that language. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. Actually,
Yeah.
ma'am, there was an activity in which we were given an audio of someone giving a speech,
Hmm.
and it was so, the pronunciation was very heavy.
Hmm. No. In speeches, what happens is people would want to stress on the word as a whole sometimes, right? They use very different techniques for that. That's not intrinsically related to the features of the language as such, the features of the components of a language. Speech takes up very different techniques to deliver their points to the audience, right? So in speeches, you probably would see some kind of shift in the stress, but that is more personal. It's more like an idiolect variation of the sound or the syllable or the stress pattern that we've looked at, right? That won't be considered the standard pattern. When you're
Oh,
asked to solve questions, we are looking at the standard patterns, right?
oh, ma'am. Just like our Prime Minister has a different, unique
Hmm.
style of giving speech, like, right?
Huh. No. Political speeches, please don't go by them. They use all kind of techniques to deliver their point across, to drive their point across. That's not how we look at things. And Indian English, if you look at the Indian English that's spoken in the subcontinent, they lack stress. Okay, because we have mother tongue interference onto that. So Indians don't speak with a stress when they usually do, right? None of our languages have stress as a prominent feature. We lack stress in we are not a stress kind, you know.
Yeah, our English is kind of
Yes.
straightforward.
Yeah, I don't know what it is called straightforward or anything for a lack of term. I'll just say that it's not stress time, right? We don't use stress as a pattern to produce speech, but English does, right?
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
Okay. All right. So we'll go through the rules then. First, we look at the general rules in stress, and then we can go on and look at some of the other patterns. Okay. All right. So monosyllabic words are stressed on the vowel sound in the word. This is, I don't need to explain it now that we've already spoken about it. So if vowel is the most important part in a given word, right? If that is what counts for your syllable formation, then obviously when you talk about the stress on a particular syllable, then we are also talking about stress on the vowel sound in that syllable, right? So in a syllabic unit, then the stress usually falls on the vowel sound of that particular syllable, because that's the main part, right? That is the one which ensures that the syllable is formed in first place. So that being the nucleus of the given segment is the one that would be the one which would take the stress, right? So vowels are the segments in the given syllable which takes the stress. So by that definition, or so by that understanding, we can say in monosyllabic words, there the stress is taken onto the uh, vowel sound itself, right? So the single vowel sound, whatever the sound is present, that is the one that's going to take up the stress, right? There are also arguments that monosyllabic words are generally not stressed, right? Some people would argue in that way. There are, you know, phoneticians who would argue for that, since there is only one syllable, the idea of stress doesn't apply quite well. Well, one can look at it that way, or if we look at the more theoretical side of it, you can say that maybe that's not true. Even if there is just one syllable and one vowel sound, that sound can also take a stress on itself, right? So since we do not have any other syllables to compare it with, probably the people have come to the conclusion that there's no stress, but that's not the case, right? Stress can still happen even if there's just one single unit of syllable. So in the case of monosyllabic words, then if the question is about where does the stress go, it's on the available vowel sound. Okay, so they're stressed on the vowel sound in the word. Now, English has an unstressed vowel, right? We have already discussed this while we were looking at the sound patterns, a sound system of English language. You remember this vowel sound schwa? Yeah, from the initial discussions in both the lectures and one of the sessions that we've had, one or two of the sessions, I think two sessions we did on sound patterns. Yes, remember schwa?
Semi vowels.
Not semi-vowels, schwa. Semi-vowels are stress formation, or at least we're not going till there. Like they are syllabic, but they are vowel-like, but they are not syllabic. They don't have the capacity to form syllables. Okay, keep that in mind. Your semi-vowels, ver and y, both of them are incapable of forming syllables. They just have a vowel-like quality, but it's not a very distinct quality also. Only vowels are capable of forming syllables. Schwa is what? Schwa is one of the pure vowels that you have in English, right? One among the 12 vowels, right? Out of which 5 are pure, we discussed already, right? Sorry, 12 of them are pure, and 20 you have diphthongs, right? Sorry, 8 you have diphthongs. So put together 20. 12 pure vowels and 8 diphthongs. So schwa is one among the 12 pure vowels you have in English. And the special feature of this schwa is that it is unstressed. Okay. Usually all other vowels, every other vowel you have in English is a stressed vowel sound, but schwa is an unstressed sound. So, which means if you have schwa.
Sorry to interfere. Can you give an example of schwa, ma'am?
Yeah, I will after I've finished talking about it, right?
Sorry.
Yeah. So, if you have schwa in a particular word, right, in a particular syllable, so that means that syllable cannot take stress, right? If you have schwa as a part of the syllabic unit, then that particular syllabic unit cannot take any stress on itself, since schwa is an unstressed vowel, and that is the idea. So to give you an example, there are several words on the screen itself. So look at something like sofa, right? So in sofa, this particular vowel sound appears at the end of the word, right? After the first sound, sofa, right? It's not sofa, sofa, right? What would be the stress? And what is this? Is it a monosyllabic word, or is it a disyllabic word, or what is it? Sofa.
Disyllabic.
Disyllabic, right? So it has 2 syllables. One is so and then fa, right? So automatically in a word like that, even though there are 2 syllables, if you're looking to mark the stress, you should know that which syllable would be stressed here? The first syllable, so, right? The first syllable, so, would be stressed because the second syllable has a schwa sound as the vowel in its syllabic unit. Okay, and since schwa is an unstressed vowel sound, it definitely cannot take stress on itself. Hence, the first syllable is the only thing that remains, and that will take the stress on itself. Okay, got it? Somebody was asking a question, right? Example someone asked. So this is one example so far, right? And if you look at the second example, emphasis. Where does the schwa sound come here? Emphasis.
Phases.
I am saying emphasis so that you understand, but actually, when you say the word, it's already emphasis, right? Not emphasis. It's not the A sound, right? Okay. Where do you find the in emphasis, where do you find the schwa sound? It's already written on the slide in the middle of words, right? So, can someone spell this word for me? Like you can pronounce this word for me so that we see how do we say this.
Emphasis.
Emphasis, right? So you don't, so the schwa sound is after the sound fa again in this, right? Emphasis, right? Emphasis. So again, how many syllables here in emphasis?
3.
3.
3.
Three. So we're not looking at which one will take the stress now, but which one will not have the stress for sure?
4.
The second syllable, right? Second syllable certainly will not have a stress because of the presence of shwasa. Similarly, round, rise, right? So these are the cases where you have shwa in the first syllable, right? It's a part of the first syllable. So the first syllable certainly will not take the stress. Then you'll have to look for stress marking on the rest of the sounds, the rest of the syllable units that you have. Okay, so that's how schwa works in case of stress marking. It's very important so that we don't go wrong on the stress marking. Right. A few more examples. Schwa is usually the sole component of er. This suffix er, which you see in words like, not in brother, sorry, brother is a wrong example. Maybe say something like teacher, right? So if you look at the suffix part of er, then you have teacher. But even in brother, you have the schwa sound, right? Where is the schwa sound in brother?
Bro.
The last part, right? The last one. The second. Brother has how many syllables again? Brother?
2.
2 syllables.
2 syllables, right? And out of the 2 syllables, the last one is the one with the schwa sound. Hence, the stress for the word brother would fall on the first syllable, which is br, right? Then comes simpler. Okay, simpler is a better example for suffix er, right? So in simpler, you have the schwa sound at okay. On which syllable will you mark the stress here in simpler? In case
Sim.
the first one, yeah. Again, simpler has 2 syllables. It's a disyllabic word, and because the last syllable has the schwa, which is unstressed, again you go to the first syllable to mark your stress. Okay, so I hope that part is clear. Now, don't look
One
at
question I
the.
have.
Yeah, go ahead.
Assume there is a word called more, M-O-R-E. First of all, is it a monosyllabic or a disyllabic?
What do you think?
More. I think it is monosyllabic.
It is monosyllabic, no? There is
So
no
in that
other
case,
vowel
actually,
sound.
the number of vowels has nothing to do with the syllabic, right? I mean, number of syllables.
But there is only one vowel sound in more. There's only one vowel sound in more. So, which is why it is monosyllabic.
Ma'am, isn't it disyllabic because there is R in the R and
Sorry?
ma'am, isn't it disyllabic because there is an R sound in the ending? More.
But R sound has got nothing to do with your syllable formation. No, it's a consonant sound. When you say more, you only hear one vowel sound. Do you hear anything apart from that? When I say more,
No, ma'am.
there's only one vowel sound. What else do you hear besides or? Do you? You don't. In more, I can only hear one. I don't know if there are other people. who
Sorry,
hear
ma'am,
more
I
than
got confused.
See, I know what you're getting confused about. You're getting confused about the vowel sounds and the letter that represents the vowel sound, right? So
Yes.
we are only looking at vowel sounds, right? every time we discuss speech and prosody or any segmental features in phonetics, we're only referring to the sounds. Do not look at the orthography and spellings and get confused. Okay. So I know more is written as MORE, but that E has got nothing. It's not contributing any sound to the word. It's only O, mo, ma, o, and even the last R is not there. Right? When you pronounce the word more, you only say more. You don't say more. More is something that we say, right? I understand that. But even with the pronunciation, even with R, you only have one vowel sound. You don't have anything more than that. So it's a monosyllabic word. Okay. Okay, now this is about prefixes and suffixes, right? So these are all units that you can find when you encounter a word, right? A word may have prefixes, it may have suffixes, it may have infixes, it may have circumfixes, right? All of this is possible. So we look at prefixes and suffixes. Suffixes are differently treated. We are going to take it up as a separate thing. But in case of prefixes, right? Prefixes are often stressed in nouns and less often in verbs, right? So if you have a prefix in a noun, right? You have a noun, and if you're using a prefix with it, then most often than not, the case would be that there can be some kind of stress. But then verbs are the ones which should take most of the prefixes in English, right? Cases where you find a prefix for nouns is not limited. There is definitely good amount of words which would have a prefix, but that volume is not as large as you would see in verbs. Verbs are more prone to taking, they're more, they have more affinity for prefixes. Nouns and adjectives, on the other hand, they have affinity for suffixes mostly, right? So it's a general observation that verbs are the ones which would like take more of prefixes. So in a verb, if you have a prefix in a verb, then it is usually not stressed, right? No stress is taken on the prefix. In nouns, it will depend based on the other syllables that are present in the word. We'll see how it works. But for starters on prefixes, you should know prefixes in verbs are usually not stressed. Okay. So second thing, if there's a prefix in an adjective, stress often falls on the first syllable of the root after the prefix. First syllable of the root after the prefix, which means what? Again, the same thing. Even in adjective, if you have a prefix, then it is not going to be stressed. Okay. The meaning of stress often falls on the first syllable of the root after the prefix. Basically means that you're going to skip the prefix and then go to the actual word without the prefix and see the stress pattern. Okay. Any questions here? The last 2 points you don't have to bother. Don't look at that. Just the fourth one, prefix part, you understand? Yes, no?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, this is for the general rules, right? General rules are the ones that we discussed. And before we discuss anything else, you should also know that since English is a language which is heavily borrowed from other languages, right? Even in its earlier stages, it has had influences from French, Scandinavian, Latin, right? So it has too many borrowings in itself. So because of the constant borrowing and lending, right? You would see that certain words may not fit the stress and rule pattern that you have in English, right? The general rules or the general stress patterns that we have derived may not be applicable to all the words in English. Yet, about 80 to 85% words still follow that pattern. The rest are the ones which are unaccounted for, or even if they are accounted for, we are not able to match it with the stress pattern of the others. Probably also because that these words are the ones which are borrowed from other languages, right? So in such words, this kind of strict patterning may not be visible. You will see some deviation from the rules. And that the reason for that is basically because this word has been borrowed from elsewhere, right? Either the word is borrowed from elsewhere or the prefix or the suffix that's a part of the word was borrowed from some other language, right? Could be multiple reasons, right? Multiple morphological reasons. For that reason, they don't fit within the rules that you have, but that doesn't mean that the rules are flawed, right? The reason is that probably this word has not originated in English, that's why, okay? But for the rest, 80 to 85%, definitely all the stress patterns and the rules that we have for them apply, right? So keep that in mind. For your exams, you won't have words which do not follow that pattern because we don't expect you to know every stress pattern on your own. So we're only going to make sure that you get questions, only the ones that fall within the rules that's discussed, right? Okay, now we're going to look at rules for stress marking in disyllabic words, right? So we're going to mostly look at the stress patterning based on two categories, two methods of stress marking. And when I say methods, I'm only referring to techniques, right? What are the techniques that you can utilize to decide which syllable of a word is stressed? First part would be by looking at the word class. That is, you look at which class of the words does the given word belong. Is it an adjective? Is it a verb? Is it a noun? Right? Is it an adverb? Right? These are the things that we are going to look at. Functional category words, right? Usually the ones that belong to the category called close class, or what is also known as prepositions, conjunctions, articles, right? These are all called functional categories because the words that belong to this category, they don't have a referent in the universe, right? When I say words like to or on or in or after or before, these are all functional in nature. They acquire their meaning only when they come with, they're used together with something else, right? Like a noun. On their own, they won't have any meaning. You can't refer to something and say that, oh, this is on, or this is at, or this is to, right? It is impossible to do that. So such category of words are called functional categories. And the lexical categories, which are nouns and adjectives and adverbs, right? Verbs. These are the ones which are usually going to participate in the stress formation, right? Sorry, in the stress pattern. Functional category words like prepositions, conjunctions, etc., usually don't have any stress on them. Okay, keep this in mind. We don't mark stress for words which are from the functional category. Only the ones which are in the lexical category would be the ones which will take stress on them. Okay. Okay. So under that you have nouns, adjectives, and adverbs. So for disyllabic, we are going to discuss them. Two-syllable nouns and two-syllable adjectives, they both take stress on their first syllable, right? So that is the rule based on the word class of a given word. So if you have a noun and if you have an adjective and if both are disyllabic, then the stress for each of those words would be always on the first syllable, right? Example, just give me a few examples for that. Give me an example of a disyllabic noun and a disyllabic adjective.
London,
London. Okay, London is a proper noun. Okay, all right. So London, stress always on the first syllable, right?
so it
Okay,
should be
London.
London. London
Sorry. Hmm?
should be London. So London should be having this stress.
London, right? So yes, the first syllable of the word is the one which is going to take the stress. Right? London. Can you come up with words which are not proper noun? Something that is a disyllabic noun but not a proper noun.
Table,
Table, right? Table. So where is the stress on in table? You have two syllables, stay and bill.
Hey,
Stay.
hey,
Stay.
table.
Correct. This first part of the word, the table, right? That's a good example. Table will have stress on its first syllable, which is stay, right? Table. Okay. How about adjective? Two-syllabic adjective.
Scary.
Scary. Okay. Scary again. Scary, right? It's going to be scary, not scary, right? More examples with this
Greater,
later.
greater.
Greater. Okay. Greater. Yeah, correct. So greater, good example. So in greater, tell me how does the stress marking work? Greater.
Gray, gray, greater.
Give-
Gray.
Yes, the syllable, the first syllable, which is gray, is the
Yes.
one which is also, that is the one which is going to be marked for stress, right? Even otherwise, right? What do we have in greater? What is the second syllable? What does it have? it has a schwa sound, right? In greater, again, you have a schwa sound. So
Okay.
even otherwise, you would have not been able to mark on the second syllable, right? Of course, it's a disyllabic adjective, and that's one of the reason why we are going to mark stress on the first syllable. Additionally, if you probe it further, you also know that the second syllable has a schwa sound. Obviously, it cannot take the stress because it is an unstressed vowel sound. Glitter, yeah, glitter again. Same example. Okay, same case. Going to take this is going to take the stress on the first syllable because of two reasons. One is that this is a disyllabic adjective. Second is that second syllable has a schwa sound. Okay, right. Now, there's another thing that is very important when it comes to stress marking, and most of the stress marking also depends because see, we have already discussed with you that stress is usually marked based on the vowel sound you have, right? So the stress in a given syllable is marked on the vowel sound, right? The vowel sound is the one which takes the stress. So if that is the case, then you should know that depending on what kind of vowel sounds you have in a word, the stress may vary in certain words. And we are going to discuss examples on that, right? Look at these two words that you have here, career and trainee, right? Anything that you see in these two, career and trainee, career, trainee. Are these both nouns, career and trainee?
Yes.
Yeah, they're both
Nouns.
nouns, right? Are they disyllabic nouns?
Sounds monosyllabic to me. Very.
You look at it carefully. Why is it monosyllabic? You only hear one vowel sound.
Okay, there is an stress on R at the end.
No,
So
forget
that
about the
is
stress for the moment. Let's go step by step. Do it step by step. How
career.
many vowel sounds do you hear in that? Career and trainee. Certainly not one, right?
Two sounds.
Definitely you have two. So in career also you have two syllables, again two vowel sounds that is, and in trainee also you have two, right? Now we'll look at where the stress is marked, where you can see the stress marked on the screen. So which syllable has taken the stress here?
Go.
Which syllable has taken the stress here? How do you mark the stress? The stress is marked with that prime notation. I've used single inverted comma because I was not able to find the prime notation. Prime notation is just like you know what prime notation is, right? It's just a small. It looks like a subscript one. That's all, right? So when you mark stress on a word, usually the stress is marked or the prime notation appears right before the syllable which takes the stress, right? So in this case, if I'm going to read it, then this part, right? Rear. The second syllable, rear, is the one which takes the stress, which is why that notation is marked right before the syllable. Okay. In trainee, again, the last syllable, E, is the one which takes the stress, which is why the notation is marked right before that. Okay. But why? Now you see a problem here because both of them are career and trainee, both of them are disyllabic nouns. And by the, based on the given rule, ideally the mark should be on the syllable, stress should be on the first syllable. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
But now we have marked it on the second syllable. The reason being, the second syllable is, in both the cases, in career and trainee, has a long vowel or a diphthong, right? So the diphthong part you can, maybe take it with a pinch of salt. But if there is a long vowel involved in a given syllable, then the stress automatically falls on that, right? The reason being, we already discussed that in a given syllable, the stress usually falls on the vowel sound, right? The vowel sound is the one which is the main unit of the syllable, and hence the stress also falls on the vowel sound only, right? So if among the syllables in a word, if there is a syllable which has a long vowel obviously the stress is going to fall on that particular syllable because that syllable will have more weight, right? It would be more weighted because of the presence of a long vowel in that. Understood? Hence, the stress then has to be automatically on the syllable with the long vowel. And that's the reason why here in both the cases, right? One has a diphthong, the other has a long vowel. Both of them are more weighty than your single vowel sound, right? Singular vowel sound, which is why the stress has fallen on career, rear in the word career, the second syllable of the word career, and E in the word trainee, which is again the second syllable of the disyllabic noun trainee. Understood? Right? So whenever there's a long vowel or a diphthong involved in a particular syllable, the stress automatically falls on that because of the weight of the syllable. Okay? Got it? Yes, no? Questions?
Somewhat
ma'am.
confusing, ma'am, but go through the videos.
Sorry?
It's a bit confusing, ma'am.
What is the confusion?
Okay, so the career, you're mentioning that there is a diphthong. So two E's are not long E.
No. So, see, that is the problem. No, you have to watch the lectures carefully and you need to train yourself. We are not looking at
Yeah.
the spelling. I'll repeat myself. Don't look at the
Okay.
spelling. You're only looking at the sounds here. Spellings have got nothing to do with any discussions here. Okay. It's a different thing altogether. That's only a representational form for you to write down things. Don't look at the spellings. You only need to focus on the sounds here.
Okay.
Right.
Sure.
Huh.
We'll look into the recordings once again.
Correct. Just look at the sounds. All discussions, every rule that has been formulated is based on the sounds. The how they are represented has got nothing to do with what we are discussing, theoretically or otherwise. Okay. So both of these will have. The first one has career has a diphthong. The second one trainee has a long vowel. And in the presence of a long vowel or a diphthong in a given syllable, the stress automatically falls on that because of the more weight that both of them can take. Right? That's all. Very simple thing. And same applies to adjectives. Okay. So look at the example given here, complete and extreme. Right? Again, complete. What's the thing here? Pleat, which is the second syllable, has a long vowel. Right? And extreme again has a long vowel. So whenever you have a long vowel or a diphthong, even in the case of an adjective, whichever syllable has these long vowel or the diphthong will take the stress, just like the case in noun. Okay. All right. Anything? Anything that is confusing or anything that you require to clarify from this part? The only deviation is in the case of the presence of a diphthong or a long vowel, right? Every other case, you will see that in disyllabic nouns and adjectives, stress falls on the first syllable. Okay, no doubts about that. But if you have a diphthong or a vowel sound in one of the other syllables, okay, say on the second or the third or the fourth, then obviously that syllable with the diphthong or the long vowel is going to have the stress on it. Okay. All right. If you have any questions, you can ask. Otherwise, we'll look at the verbs, right? Verbs are easier to understand because there are no much complications. Okay. Right. So in the case of verbs, then what happens? Two syllable verbs. Adjectives and nouns are marked on the first syllable. Verbs are marked always on the second syllable. Okay. If you have a disyllabic verb, then the stress is on the second syllable. Okay. So that is the primary difference between adjectives and nouns and even adverbs. Adverbs are also usually marked on the first syllable. Adverbs, adjectives, and nouns are always marked, most of the times, marked on the first syllable. Verbs, on the other hand, disyllabic verbs, they're always marked on the second syllable, right? So you look at the example here, dislike, misplace, right? So dis and miss are both prefixes here. We already discussed that prefixes don't take any stress on themselves when they appear in the verb, right? That could be one reason why there is no stress on the first syllable. And the second reason is also that usually in a disyllabic word, the stress is on the second syllable. Okay. Take it slow. I know it could be like confusing to take in all the rules in one go, but if you understand, have some examples ready with you so that you can easily refer. Right? You can take the examples on the screen. They're simple examples. Maybe at least keep one with you. Right? Take one from each of the set. Make a note of it and learn the rules based on the words that you have chosen, right? So that you can remember it better. Okay. You don't have anything to remember actually, but maybe as beginners on the stress part, you might take some time to get used to it, right? Okay. Any questions from this part? Two syllable nouns, two syllable adjectives, and two syllable verbs. Guava. Noun, guava, stress on va here. Why would you stress on va?
Uh, Va has the diphthong, right, ma'am?
Va has a diphthong, no?
GUA should
Hmm.
be,
Hmm.
is it a diphthong or it is?
Again, you are doing the mistake is again the same. You're looking at the spelling, right? Don't look at the spelling. If you look at the spelling, then yeah, U and I, it looks like there's a diphthong. There's no diphthong. You say guava, right? So there's g sound, then the v sound, then an sound, and then v and again then an The last is basically a schwa sound also, guava, right? So get used to this. If you're getting confused between the sounds because of your, interference of the spelling, check it, right? Don't bother with the spelling. Just say the word to yourself and ask yourself what are the sounds that I'm hearing in the word, right? If you keep looking at the word, then that spelling thing will, it will betray you. Don't do that. Guava doesn't have any diphthong. Guava only has pure vowels, two pure vowels. Out of which the second one is schwa, which is unstressed. So obviously you can't have the stress on the second syllable here.
So
Okay.
Va only will be having the.
Yeah, it's on the first syllable, the
Okay.
gua, the first syllable, which is gua. Okay.
Thanks, ma'am.
Huh. Yeah. Anyone else? Any other question? We can continue in the next class also. So I'm ready to like answer your questions at this point because anyway, I'm going to continue discussing about the stress part in the next class as well, right?
Ma'am,
So
can you repeat the topic that just started in the starting of disyllabic words?
repeat the topic which started in the beginning of, no, please ask me more pointed questions, no? What do you mean by the first part? What exactly do you want an explanation on?
Ma'am, you told us there was something kind of like stresses
Huh.
on nouns and something on there would be no stress if there is no other word like on.
Oh, that part. Okay. So, okay, let me just give it to you in writing. You have something. Usually, the words in English, when you look at them grammatically, you have two categories, right? Functional and lexical. Okay. So, in functional category, you have words which are part of prepositions, right? Conjunctions. Hmm. Then you also have articles, right? The a and the. Uh, these are all referred to as functional categories because they don't have any reference in the universe, right? So when I say on or it has a meaning, but that meaning is acquired only when they appear with other elements in a sentence. On its own, these words will not have a meaning, or rather, you can't point out to some object or place or person and say, oh, this is on, or this is it, or this is that, or this is this, right? They're all pointers. They're all functional words. They acquire their meaning only when they appear in a sentence with other elements, other lexical elements like noun, verbs, adjective, and so on and so forth, right? Whereas lexical categories then include words that are verbs, right? Nouns, adjectives, adverbs, right? These are all examples of lexical categories, which means there is a reference out there or the word on its own has a meaning, When I say kill, for example, I know what it means. It has a clear understanding. When I say table, I know it has a clear meaning and it has a reference in the universe, right? When I say lovely, then again I know that I'm talking about what I mean by lovely. That there's a possibility of reference involved there again, right? So these are called lexical categories. So when you talk about stress, stress is only on the lexical categories. On functional categories like prepositions or conjunctions or articles, there is no stress. Okay. The reason is also that when you in your day-to-day life, when you make conversations with people, you talk spontaneously, right? So in spontaneous speech, most of these functional words, they are not very stressed while you talk. What is stressed more on is the lexical categories, right? So when I say that I went to the market, right? For example, in spontaneous speech, it would be I went to the market, right? So the two part there is not, it's barely audible. You can't even hear it. So the stress usually then doesn't appear on functional categories. Only these other categories like verbs, adverbs, adjectives, they are the ones which take stress. Okay.
Ma'am, what about pronouns like it?
Pronouns, pronouns do have stress. Okay, the moment you say noun, pronouns are also included. But then most of the pronouns are just monosyllabic, right? The stress on them is not very visible or prominent because most of them are monosyllabic also. Like whether you talk about I or we or you or they or he or she or it, most of them are monosyllabic, which is why it's not prominent. But yes, they have stress.
Okay, ma'am.
Like
Thank
I say,
you.
he went to the market, right? Monosyllabic. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, no problem. Is it functional? Interjection? No. Interjection is not even like a word class, right? They are expressives. In modern linguistics, interjections are not considered part of the speech as such. It's part of the speech, but it's certainly not a grammatical category. It is more related to prosody. And interjection, no. Usually, no.
Thank you.
Hmm. Okay. Any questions? So we have now rules on trisyllabic and then finally suffixes, which we can do in the next class. I don't want to like give you too many rules and confuse. So for the time being, you keep in mind the stress, the general stress rules and also the stress rules for disyllabic adjectives, nouns, adverbs, and verbs, right? So we'll discuss the trisyllabic and the suffix one in the next class. And we'll discuss a bit on aspiration also, right? Because aspiration is also very closely connected to stress patterns. Aspiration happens because of stress. We'll do that in the next class. Maybe the first 20 minutes should be enough for us to discuss it, and then we can go ahead and solve the questions. Okay. So meanwhile, if you have any doubts, you can keep them ready. Next class, you can come and get it clarified. Okay. All right. So see you next week again then. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
See you again.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sure. See you again.